We're Summer and Reppard Gordon, and we have 3 children. We live here in Northport, and this is a little bit of our story as to how we got introduced to InStride and how we've become passionate about InStride and the mission that it serves.
I'm Summer. My youngest, Sawyer, is the reason that we were brought to InStride. So our relationship with InStride began when our son Sawyer was diagnosed with developmental delay. And what that meant for him was that he was just behind and things were taking him a little bit longer to catch up. Things just didn't come as easily. So he participated in occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, all the therapies. And at 2 years of age, the speech therapist came to our home because he was in the early intervention plan. And I remember her saying, you should really look into hippotherapy for him. And I had never heard of hippotherapy, but as she explained it, she just really felt that it would be beneficial for him and that it was multiple therapies in one, essentially. And so I left no stone unturned, and so immediately called InStride. And that next week we had his evaluation, and they concurred that they thought it would be beneficial for him. And so the following week was his first session. And the first session, like many kids, had some tears, and that's okay. After the second session, it was all joy. Those tears turned to smiles. And the nice thing, especially for me as a mom, was that this was something in his eyes that he got to do and not something that he had to do. We weren't placing demands on him. He wasn't stuck in a cold classroom having to try to manipulate scissors that he couldn't manipulate. He was simply riding a horse and engaging with friends, but he didn't realize that he was working and doing so much therapy. It was engaging his core. He had low tone. It was really improving his hip rotation and hip rotation and mobility. All of these things were just his life was being enhanced and enriched by. And something else that was hard for Sawyer was his speech. So he had some speech delays, and it was maybe 2 or 3 therapy sessions with InStride, and I'll never forget that day. He was riding a horse named Doc, and the therapist said, "Sawyer, do you want to go?" And he nodded his head, and they said, "Well, tell him, say, go Doc." And at that point, he had never put 2 words together. And that day, he said, "Go Doc." And I was so excited and just so happy for him. And it was just a very tangible moment for me to see the improvement that he was already making only after 3 sessions. And
Summer talked a little bit about turning over every rock, not leaving a rock left unturned, and that's really what she did. She was an advocate for Sawyer, and so when she shared with me about InStride, I was ignorant. I didn't know really anything about it. I'd never heard about it, unfortunately, but she encouraged me to come out and just take a look and watch him ride, and so I did. And on that day, it was certainly a couple of weeks he had already been riding, but on that day I got to experience him being much more vocal than normal, and this is a kid who didn't say anything, and so having any words come out of his mouth was a major accomplishment. But after that ride, I wanted to find a way that I could participate and experience a little bit more of InStride, and so Summer had introduced me to a great lady, Mary Naston, and she shared with me a little bit more about InStride, and I wanted to figure out a way that I could participate. And so, some of them in the most severe state were hunched over at the beginning of their ride because kind of that core support was something they drastically struggled with. And then towards the end of a 30-minute ride, the children and some of the adults are just sitting upright, and they're doing crazy tasks with rings on bars, and they're physically, they are exhausted towards the end of the ride. But you could also see how a 30-minute ride on a horse, and sometimes maybe even a little bit longer, but how that would bring such joy to the student, to the rider, and give such joy. And I think you put it right. You said he was having fun and getting a workout at the same time, and I was able to see that intimately as a sidewalker and participating with InStride.
That's something that was just a blessing for us. You know, when people have a disability or a delay and things just don't come as naturally, they're not afforded all of the opportunities that someone who doesn't struggle is afforded. And so, for instance, my older two kids, they don't have a disability, and so they were in soccer and in gymnastics. And with Sawyer, this was his thing. This was his fun thing. And it was just such a blessing. And I remember bringing my other kids. Sawyer would say, I'm going to ride the nene. Get to go ride the nene. And my other kids are sitting there watching, and they're like, no fair, I want to go. Why can't I ride? And this was his special treat. Well, he didn't realize that he was working too. So it was just an incredible blessing for us. Unfortunately, 2.5 years ago, our son was involved in an accident, and we lost him in that accident. And so now, when we were planning the funeral, the community just poured and showered their love out on us. And everybody wanted to help and didn't know what to do. And so when we were planning the funeral, we thought in lieu of flowers, we would do donations to InStride. And so when Sawyer passed away, we knew immediately what we wanted to do with those funds. We wanted to give back to InStride, and we wanted people to be able to receive the same therapy that he was able to receive. And the community donated over $20,000, which was incredible. So now there's a memorial scholarship in his name here at InStride, Sawyer Gordon Memorial Scholarship. So now InStride has become so much more than therapy that greatly enhanced our son's life. It's also become part of his legacy.